Well, welcome to Your City at Work. I'm Tom Loucks, Communications Director, and thank you for joining me and Steve Barg, my guest.
Good to be here.
All right. Well, we have a lot on tap to talk about in this edition of Your City at Work, and I bring you in here once a month to ask some more high-level questions, more than we can do during our regular council preview program. So why don't we just get right into a couple things. October is going to be a busy month coming up for you. Can you tell me what's going to be on your plate? I know budget is probably the top piece.
Yeah, I was going to say budget, and budget, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and the 2023 budget process is in full swing, Tom, and right now we're at the point where department heads have submitted their budgets. Are being reviewed by the finance department, providing them to me. We're at the point now looking at what we can really fit into a proposed budget. And I know I say this every year. You've been here for 3 or 4 years now, so it sounds like a broken record, but it's going to be another tough year. A lot of challenges for us. And the problem, I think we're going to talk about this in a minute, is state revenues are relatively flat. I'm not saying they never go up, but they're fairly flat, and the state kind of ties our hands in terms of how much we can levy. Levy limits, for people who have heard about it, is the means of trying to control local property taxes. So it's hard to get the expenses and revenues to match up, but we'll be spending a lot of time in the next 3 or 4 weeks at staff level, and then the council meetings will start in the middle of October, and we'll go through it.
All right. Well, I was looking at the League of Municipalities. It's a good organization to really get information from. I'm sure you're a part of it, and were probably a board member at one time.
I was, about a few years ago, yeah.
And I was looking at how you get state aid, and there's so many pieces to it. One of them that really kind of perplexed me was why so late on finding out certain things from the state to do a budget?
I know. If anybody from the state is tuned in here, please try and modify that. The biggest one that we get late is state transportation aid. We don't get that till the first week in October. Well, at the first week in October, we're trying to wrap this thing up, put a ribbon and bow on it, and get it off to the council. And I don't know why they can't do that earlier, but we get about $1.5 million, $1.5 million in state aid. But sometimes it can go up or down by $150,000, one way or the other. So it's an important piece of our puzzle. And like I said, it's usually like the 3rd or 4th of October before we hear. Even the other aids that we hear about, state general revenues and other things, it's not until sometime in September before we hear. So it's a little farther into the planning process than we'd like to hear, but I know they've got their own issues to deal with as well.
Are those part of the general fund, or is only taxes the general fund?
No, those are part of the general fund. And the general fund, if I can maybe give a little high level, is about $23.5 million. And out of that $23.5 million, about 55% of it or so, almost $13 million is property taxes. Then another third of it, roughly 35%, let's say, is from state revenues, and that would be the general revenue, transportation aid, connecting highway aid, those types of things. The final 10% or so, Tom, is an assortment, a real broad assortment, everything from parking fines to fees, licenses, permit fees. Grants, other odds and ends, they make up the final 10% of that puzzle. But again, 90% is the property taxes and the state aids. So the state aids is a big part of what we do.
It's important. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to provide the services that we currently do provide. Is that right?
Very true. And I know that Madison has a lot of issues of their own to deal with. And there's been a lot of talk in recent years, Tom, in fact, going back quite a few years. Do we need to modify this system of how we do state shared revenue? There's a formula that not many people understand. And the thought is if we tried to revise it and really make it more understandable and I'll even say the word rational, there'd be winners and losers. And the winners are going to be happy and the losers are going to be pretty unhappy as to why they see a drop. Because all we're doing is recarving the same pie. So I don't think we're going to see any major changes in how state revenue is calculated for reallocation. But it'd be great if we could see another review of that.
Okay. One last question on that the citizens might hear in the budget process with our council is expenditure restraint. What does that mean?
Good question, Tom. I call it a pie. And the idea that the state created this many years ago saying that we want to incentivize cities and villages to go even beyond levy limits to even really have a good, tight restriction on their spending. So what they say is, here's the pie, and if you stay within the guidelines we give you in terms of how much you expend your spending, maybe 3% over last year or 2.5 or whatever it is, if you stay within that parameter, you'll qualify for the next year's your share of the pie. So here's the way it works. We're doing the budget now in 2022 for 2023 to qualify for a payment in 2024. So if we decided in the 2023 budget process, Tom, you know what? We need to spend more than that. We're going to blow right through what they tell us the limit is to qualify. Well, then we get to 2024, and we're going to be foregoing about $400,000 in revenue. That's roughly what we get from that program. So it's very few cities will do that. You're almost always committing yourself to reining in spending where you have to qualify that, because giving up a big chunk of money like that, in our case $400,000, is really hard to explain.
Well, Steve, the League of Municipalities, as I mentioned before, is a really important process for you and our staff to be a part of. And in the fall, they generally have programs for elected officials, yourself, staff, myself, to attend. And like we were talking about before, with expenditure restraint and all these pieces, you learn a lot from them. But what is going on this fall that some of the staff and maybe elected officials might go to?
Well, Tom, it's the annual League of Wisconsin Municipalities Conference. It's held this year in La Crosse. It'll be in the middle of October. And that's a really big event they have each year. It's a 3-day conference where they invite elected and appointed officials to come. There are sessions that everyone goes to, but then there's also a lot of breakout sessions where you can look at it and there's like 5 different tracks. So you'll be looking at your program at 9 o'clock on Thursday morning. Here's one on economic development. Here's one on infrastructure improvements. Here's one on communicating better with your residents. You can just pick out the ones you want and go to separate breakout rooms and learn a ton of things. And you learn so much in those sessions. They have a lot of professionals from the public and private sector that present. And then what you learn when you're in the lobby between times, when you're having lunch with other city representatives, you come back with great ideas about policies, ordinances, all the things that they do in their communities. You can apply them to yours. It's a great 3-day learning experience. It really is.
All right. And our city is a member of this municipalities group?
We are. We're a dues-paying member of the league. And if I can just for a moment say, they do a lot of other things during the year. They're a lobbying group. They really lobby state legislators and the governor for things that are good for cities and villages. They also provide resources. They provide legal assistance. Sometimes if the city attorney has a question, we turn to the league attorneys for guidance. So they provide a lot of good things for us all year round.
All right. Well, when you guys get back, I think you're going, right, Steve?
Yeah.
And maybe some elected officials.
A lot of them.
Will go. I'll bring that back on our table to see what you guys learned and maybe provide an update to the residents.
That'd be great, Tom. And the last I heard from our administrative specialist, I think 7, maybe even 8 of our elected officials are going.
Wow.
And that's great. It'll be a good opportunity for them to see what their peers are doing across the state of Wisconsin as well.
Well, you bet. All right, well, let's talk about Director of Development Services. We haven't had one since, March. April?
March.
You and staff as well have kind of filled those gaps for now, but that's not the same as having a director in place. Where are we at on that?
It's been a long road. You and I have talked on these programs about all the different things we've dealt with in terms of staffing. Finance director, HR director, many others. And here it really comes down to, at the director level, one position we can't seem to fill. It's a very important position because they oversee economic development, planning and zoning, and building inspection. We went through this, for those of you who haven't heard this before, we went through this twice ourselves, once right away in March and then a second time in May, trying to get candidates by our own PR and our own different sources. And we weren't able to come up with somebody that would, we got one person once who turned down the job. We had some good candidates that we didn't think really quite met what we were looking for. And then now we've been using a firm called GovHR that does professional executive level recruiting for jobs like this in the Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin area. And the deadline just passed. We're doing this program on Thursday, September 8th. And the end of the day on the Tuesday, September 6th, the deadline passed. We have some candidates. We have a handful of candidates to go through. I'm not sure at this point whether or not one or more of them are going to be ones that we're going to want to interview. Hopefully that'll be the case as we dive in deeper, and we'll have to make some decisions. And it's just hard. It's a very tough job market. I hear this from everybody. I hear this from HR professionals in the public and private sector, Tom. But we're just hopeful that we'll be able to land someone for the very important position.
Very, very, very important. So maybe by the time we meet in October, second week of October is when we do this program with you.
Yeah.
We'll see if there's some news that we can share.
That would be great.
That would be great for
We really
you
need that.
as well as staff. So
Yep.
I'll tune into that. Let me talk a little bit about items that would be going on in that department. Daniel's edition, I believe that was brought up at EDB.
It was, and we still have about roughly 2/3 of the lots sold or pre-sold. There are a couple still need to get to the finish line on closings. We don't have as many houses in progress as we'd like, and that's one of the things that I think council has been a little concerned about as we've talked about other housing projects, is not seeing Daniels develop quite as soon as we'd like, but it is happening. It's going to happen slowly, but there's projects going on, and so we expect to see, like I said, roughly 2/3 of those homes built out, looking down the road. Still trying to sell the remaining lots. I think it's going to be a success. I know people thought by this time in the year there might be more homes up, but still opportunities. If you're looking for a lot to buy and build upon, you can call Next Home Realty. Ashley Frederick there is the one who handles it for us, and she would be happy to talk to you about the requirements and expectations and see if you're interested in buying one.
That land was purchased by the city and put all the infrastructure in, correct?
Correct.
And basically ready to go. It's, how about we call it shovel ready?
Yeah, this was a new thing for the city. We have never done this before that I'm aware of, certainly not in my time here. Taking the initiative to have the city buy the land, put in the infrastructure, and then find people to build. Typically, it's the developer, developing, and they might be asking us for help in terms of funding the street and sewer and water and all that. But we've been so short of, especially single-family lots, Tom, that we felt we needed to do something. And this 23-lot subdivision on the west end of town is a good thing for us. We may do it again, we may not. We're trying to incentivize or really encourage more development and kind of spur on growth.
All right. A while back, maybe not even a while back, we talked about industrial land that was bought from the UW, I believe. We do own that now, is that right?
We do. As of the end of June, Tom, we own 123 acres. It's directly adjacent to the current Yellowstone Industrial Park, and it's part of TIF District 12. Some people who tune into our broadcast a lot may remember the fact that we carved out a part of TIF District 7 and added it to some more land to make TIF District 12. So what that means, if people are like, what's a TIF district? That will offer the opportunity for us to have the ability to put infrastructure in and to offer incentives to people to buy and build out there. And I can share one more thing that if you saw at EDB, you probably are aware of, that with the great work of Karen Olson and others, come from utilities, Dan Connect from Public Works, David Bueller, GIS coordinator, Stephen Wiley, our city planner. We pulled enough information together and got it submitted to WEDC, the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, to where we're one of 3 communities across the state that they're looking at for what they call their Certified Sites program. And that means if we do some things to work through the details, get more information from them, meet the criteria, we might be one of those sites that they're really declaring to developers and builders is kind of shovel ready. And that would be a big PR thing for us. But the main thing for right now is we have 123 acres of land where we really were running very short of industrial land.
Yeah, and this can be used for large industries that would maybe want to come to our area, and but right now it's basically blank, nothing there at this point.
Yeah, it's vacant land, and we got it from UW. But the real thing is that now we have the land. Before this time, the biggest piece of land we had out there was, I think, maybe 15 acres or something. And people do call, if not the city, they call Mackey, and they say, hey, look, I want to move to one of 5 cities in central Wisconsin. You're one of the ones we're looking at. Now I need a 40-acre site. Oh, we don't have a 40-acre site. Okay, click. We were never even in the game. Yeah. We didn't have a tract of land big enough to support it. Now we are in the ball game to be competitive for those type of opportunities.
Yeah, and that land is totally different than single-family homes.
It is. That will be it'll be zoned industrial, which means it's there's a lot of things. It doesn't necessarily mean heavy industry, but it means the type of development that you would expect to see in an industrial zoned area, typically manufacturing and that type of thing.
All right. Any other thing happening on West 2nd Street redevelopment process, or is that on hold?
Well, I talked to the EDB the other day, and I think I've tried to keep council apprised as well on this idea of getting a meeting together of different groups, people from, like, somebody from the council, somebody from the plan commission, somebody from Mackey, somebody from CDA, putting all that together and talking about the implementation phase. Everybody's really excited that we have a plan. They see the possibilities of growth and development in that area, again, to the west and north roughly of the post office. But what happens now? Who's going to make this happen, and who's going to be responsible for handling inquiries and tracking the projects? So getting a meeting together probably late this month, maybe early October, of an individual or two from each one of those groups to kind of map out a strategy and talk about what resources we can use. I mean, we've got our financial advisor, Ellers, that can help us create a TIF district. We've got Van de Waal, the consulting firm that helped us set this plan up. They're willing to help with the implementation phase. So map out what are the resources that can help us to walk through the implementation phase. It won't all happen that night, Tom, believe me, but just starting down that road of what is the implementation going to look like.
That's a big part of our downtown as well.
It is, and people have talked about that area for a long time. Nothing bad about it, but the opportunities to improve it and see more development are there.
Yeah, most definitely to do that. I guess also our garage, I call it the garage for our street department, it's not really in downtown, I don't want to say that, but that is a piece that this Second Street might go to. What about the piece that they were talking about having a shared site with the county?
That's still being talked about, Tom. It's a little bit maybe quiet for the moment with some of the summertime work that both the county and the city do with roads and whatnot. And also because Dan Kinneck, our Public Works Director, who does a marvelous job, he's been pushed and pulled a lot of ways too without the Development Services Director position being filled. So he's had to spend a lot of his time working on some of the projects we've already talked about with industrial land acquisition and so forth. But it's still being talked about. There's still the real opportunity for a shared site between the county and the city on the southeast part of town. And I think as we get into now the latter part of 2022 and into early 2023, you'll hear that crank up a lot more.
Now the EDB has put this on their agenda, some of these items. Is that their area to do that with, and is that kind of where things are generated, is this board, and then moved on to the council? Is that how that works?
That's a really good question, Tom. I mean, the EDB agendas, sometimes they look like they overlap with the council, and they kind of do. When we created the EDB, Economic Development Board, back in 2013, maybe whenever it was around there, the mission was anything that relates to creating economic development, whether that be residential, commercial, or industrial. And so you hear us talk about everything from, they were the ones who really championed the Daniels edition, and they're also looking at trying to get industrial development in the new 123 acres. And you say, wait a minute, those are two very different things. Well, they all tie together, they're about development. So they've been talking a lot about West 2nd Street Corridor and about TIF District 13, where we're trying to get some housing going on, and industrial development by Yellowstone. They're a driver. Now, ultimately, a lot of things that they do need approval from the council. They can't just take actions, buy property, spend money a lot of times without council blessing. So most of the items will feed back to the council ultimately, but hopefully they're working in tandem.
Now they do have their own budget, is that correct?
They do, yep. They get about, between $250,000 and $300,000 roughly from a dividend paid to them by Marshfield Utilities.
Okay.
And those monies are expressly dedicated by utilities for economic development. So they spend some of it on projects and they spend some of it on helping other entities. I mean, a certain amount of money is used for the business development director position that Karen Olson has with Mackey, or Main Street, keeping up the downtown area. But that roughly $250,000 is used, broadly speaking, to further economic development.
Well, it makes a lot of sense, the utility benefits of when new customers come. So I can kind of see the
they
relationships.
Do. They do. And the dividend comes, it's a part of a dividend they get from ATC, the transmission company, and so we appreciate that they pass along some of it to us. They wouldn't have to do that. They already pay a pilot, which is payment in lieu of taxes. But that money, you're right, it does help them too in the sense that it furthers more development. That means more customers for Marshfield Utilities.
Yeah. Well, this might be a little harder question. I didn't give it to you, but just kind of ask.
Yeah.
It kind of begs the question. We have these other departments. I don't want to say department like streets and utility. They're ours, right? But they have different budgets. Is that right? They run in different budget
They do.
system?
They do. In fact, we never really, during the budget process, talk about utilities. They're under the city's umbrella, and sometimes these relationships need to be talked about. They're not a separate company. They don't exist apart from the city. In fact, the council, if they wanted to, could say, look, let's bring them under the auspices directly of city staff. But they do a great job of what they do: electric and water rates, planning for improvements, long-term vision work. We really are thankful for the board and staff of the utilities. But yeah, they're separate to some degree. The library, I mean, they're part of us, but ultimately when the approval is given for the budget, they can use the monies as they see fit, basically, under state law. There's a lot of different relationships that you have to understand under state law and under city code about how these things work.
Yeah, you just can't go ahead and use all that money for something here versus
No.
there's some things that you can't, especially like tax base from, I'll call it a tax, but from hotel tax. That's different.
Yeah,
too.
right.
You can't just go use
No.
it all.
No. And think about wastewater. If you look at the wastewater fund balance, there's a big fund balance.
Yep.
And so sometimes you'll hear people say, hey, let's take all that money from there and use it for, whatever. Those monies are intended for the wastewater utility. Someday, they're going to have to put in all new equipment, expand the plant, redo the plant, and so they've got money put aside for that. So you don't want to be talking about robbing funds just for the moment. And some of that
Correct.
stuff is protected in pretty noteworthy ways.
Yeah. Some of it could even be under ordinance too, and
Correct.
how that works, or a
Correct.
2/3 or vote by a council to do such and such. I'm sure that's been done years ago. So
Yeah, you look at the reason why they were created in the first place. They were created for a specific purpose, not to be, shared around with other needs.
Right. All right. Well, I kind of went through all the pieces I wanted to talk to about development services area. I guess there's one thing, and I don't know if you have anything new, is the clinic. Anything in regards to the clinic on taxes that you could share?
We're continuing to talk with them. I maybe mentioned it the last time you and I talked. I don't know what program that would have been, but the clinic folks are very receptive and very helpful, having our assessors and our attorneys over there for a tour of the facility, which is really important because, they're talking on the phone, they're emailing, and both sides need to know exactly what spaces we're talking about. What is really going on in this part of the East Wing? What's really going on in that part of the clinic building itself? And so that helped a lot. There's a lot of sharing of information going on. If this does go to court for a trial per se, so to speak, that would be held in probably sometime in 2023. That's a long ways out yet. But the parties are still looking at the strength or lack of strength in their cases and talking about how to proceed. I think you'll see dialogue go on between the two parties. And again, I want to remind everybody that we're working together on a host of other things. So it's not like the world has stopped while we're waiting to see how this turns out. We know that they need us and we need them, and we work together.
All right. Well, I'll ask again, like I have been doing, just to see if something is new, and generally, if there's something major, I'm sure we may know
Yep.
about it through a council meeting later on. So,
True.
all right. Last question I want to ask you: any goals that you have in the next 3 months that you would like to kind of obtain, get done?
Well, we want to get some of these things to the finish line. We're very, very close on the mall project. People are super excited about that. We're hoping this month to tie that together as far as the city's part of it, the agreement between the city and the developer. Get those businesses. You've heard who they are now. We're talking about Hobby Lobby, Ross, Planet Fitness, those kind of places, and they're going to be very well received. So people are excited about that. The idea of getting another housing, opportunity maybe started. The council did vote against the Green Tree project, and we understand why. The bids came in high for the infrastructure. There were some other questions raised, but I think we need to keep talking beyond Daniels about seeing what does the council want to see next? What type of housing? What price ranges? Give us some guidance. We'll be talking with them about where we go next. Because they didn't say they don't want housing. They were concerned and had some valid questions about the proposal in front of them, but we need to take that to the next level. And then I think really getting through the budget process is going to be a big thing. And also I think continuing to grow people and help people in their jobs. We've hired a lot of new people in the last 12 months, Tom. And really good people, wonderful people, but trying to continue to acclimate people and get them up to speed and include them more and more in some of our leadership meetings and activities is another good goal.
All right. Well, those sound like great things to get done and accomplished. The budget will be first thing on your mind, and
Yeah.
we'll all be hearing about that with special meetings. I'm sure you'll provide that to us once you know those meetings are going to take place with the council,
Yeah,
I believe?
there are actually dates out there already.
Oh, there is.
Yeah, that we can put out there for the public to see. They've already been set. They start in the middle of October.
Okay, well, I'll dig those up and get those out probably somewhere on our website and maybe in our next programs or council preview program. We can mention those
Very
as
good.
well.
Very good.
But like as always, thanks for spending that half hour of your time here with me and our residents.
Oh, it's a pleasure, and this is a great program. I want to thank and commend you and David for it, and just the opportunity. We talk on those the council preview meeting about the agendas, but there's a lot of stuff that is not on the agenda that's going on that's important business for the public, and you're covering that here. So I thank you.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to do for a while, and now with David on board here the last 6 months and some newer equipment, we're able to do that and bring that to our residents, and we'll continue doing that through a newsletter, online, Facebook, you name it, whatever we can do to get that information out. I know everyone uses different platforms, and that's why it's so important that we communicate. But if you have a question that you would like me to ask our city administrator or anybody else that I have on this program, I have the local sheriff on here, and I'm looking to get more as well. Please send that to me by calling 715-486-2070. That's my direct line, and you can leave your name and phone number if I'm not able to answer, and leave me a question, and I can bring it up to Steve and get this answered for you on air. And I think it would help a lot of other people if you have that question. So again, I want to thank you for joining us on Get to Know Your City, and this is our City Administrators Report section. Thanks for joining us.